Hey, yo, what's up, everybody? It's me, Joe Pisapia, and welcome to Fantasy Pros, the home of fantasy sports. It is me. It is a great guest, Frank Stampfl today, and it's you, and we're talking about the bust team. That's right. All the players where everything is going to go wrong in 2021, or at least potentially. Frank, my good friend, and I are going to take you through this. We're going to have a great show. We're going to go through every position, give you our picks for the guys who are going to bust out and possibly be bad investments this year in your fantasy baseball shares, and also maybe answer some questions if there's time. And of course, we're going to play a little game with my boy Frankie. We're going to play some What's Trending, where we like to take trending topics from Twitter and turn them into baseball and or very interesting discussions. But this guest of ours today, you know him obviously from CBS Fantasy Baseball Today. He and I have done countless shows over the years together, but it has been a while because I want to say Frank Stampfl and I have not gotten to really sit down and chat ever since the pandemic. So this is a treat for me. Frank, I miss doing shows with you. I miss working with you. It is great here, and it's so great to see all your success at CBS. I am so proud of you. You're such a hardworking guy, and it's so great when you see your friends and guys that you know are just hardworking folks who are so passionate like you are, get these opportunities and then not only get them, but crush them. So congrats. I know, it's been a while there, but it's been a while since you and I really got to talk. So I'm so happy you're here today with us. I'm so happy for you crushing it on CBS, man.
First and foremost, Joe. Ayo, Joey
Ayo.
P. We're back and we're reunited and it feels so good. Man, I appreciate the kind words. We have done a lot of work together and I always appreciated our time doing shows together and we had a lot of fun and we've done some great stuff. We were just talking about how we covered the NFBC main event a couple of years ago. We're coming up on that anniversary. So it's really awesome to be back talking with you and I really do appreciate the kind words, man. Thank you. And congrats to you. Look at you at Fantasy Pros.
Look at us. Look at us. Who'd have thought? Look at us. But, it's funny. We did, 8 hours in that NFBC coverage a couple years ago? Yep. It was you, myself, Brad Ziegler. We sat down and just kind of, talk baseball for an entire day on air. And that's when you're working with great people, when you could just do that and it just flows and you're having a good time, man. And that's what we're doing here today, too, doing the same kind of stuff. And it's important. I always say, I like to make the list of the guys that I don't like and make sure that I am very wary of them. I do believe in the $1 million man premise where every player has a price on my team. But at the same time, I think it's very important, Frank, don't you, to really examine what that price is and when you want to invest in it. And especially the players that really do come at a questionable price because there could be some downside or know that maybe they're trending upward and maybe you're not buying into the trend. So how important is it to you that you separate the Frank guys from the not Frank guys?
Oh, I think it's very important. You have to have a plan, right? And that's why we spend all offseason talking about this and analyzing. And there's all different kinds of stats and underlying analytics now that we have to use when analyzing fantasy baseball. So you kind of jumble it all together and you spit out, your opinion of a specific player. And we play this game. It's a value-based game. And I've said this many times where it's weird. From one year to the next, you can be on a player versus off a player. Last year, I was all over Jose Abreu, and that's because year in and year out, he's undervalued, and I've said that many times. And last year, he went out and won the American League MVP. If the season was a full 162, would it have happened? I don't know that. But now this year, he jumps up a couple of rounds, and he's going inside the first 4 rounds now, according to ADP. And I'm not as likely to draft someone like Jose Abreu. And we'll talk about that with a few different players here that we'll be avoiding mostly today. But it's just interesting that people have to realize that, like, just because you like a player, the valuations are going to change year in and year out, and you have to be able to find those players who are coming at either coming at a cost that you like, or guys that ultimately are going too high, which I think we're going to talk about right now.
I think it's everything. And you mentioned a guy like Abreu, who I'm with you. Every year in the Black Book, I would write about him, and I would say the same thing. It's like, why doesn't everybody love Jose Abreu as much as I do? He hits on the road. He hits away. He hits in the first half. He hits in the second half. He hits lefties. He hits righties. He hits everything. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss kind of story the way I talk about him, but it's true. And then what happens is he finally goes out there and he wins an award and he gets some national recognition. And you're right. Then the ADP grows a little bit and he's still a valuable player, but Do you want to overpay for him? That is the question too. And that's what this is all about. Before we dive in on all the individual players here, I just want to remind everybody to go out there and subscribe to Fantasy Pros MLB, which is our YouTube channel. We just did our Fantasy Baseball Fest on Friday, 4 glorious hours. It was amazing, phenomenal guests. If you missed it, go back there, but subscribe and also click the notifications button because we're going to do a lot of work this season over there, and you're going to want to be able to watch and listen to it all. Also, I want to direct everybody over to our Draft Wizard, MLB Draft Simulator we've got there. We can go and obviously just mock, back things out, make changes, get your analysis at the end, get your draft grades, see where your teams are doing well and not doing well, and get ready for your drafts because we are in the thick of it these next few weeks. And if you like busts, oh my goodness, we got more bust talk for you as well, because this week we have a big article coming out actually tomorrow afternoon where we poll the industry for their biggest busts in the upcoming fantasy baseball season. It's going to be great, very big stuff going on there. So make sure you get involved. And don't forget, if you got those drafts coming up, use our MLB Draft Assistant with Sync. It syncs to your league. It tells you when to pick which player. It tells you what the chances are that certain players are going to last the next round and the round after that. It tells you where to reach, when to reach, and when not to reach. And that's all very important stuff. So go check out our Draft Assistant also. So, Frank, we're going to go back and forth here, you and I, and we'll start with the catcher position, which you know me. We've done a lot over the years together. Catcher is not my thing. Not a big fan of the position when it comes to fantasy. The fact that 2 catcher leagues even still exist just makes me want to smash lots of things. In fact, I got to get Hulk hands. I feel like I think I would benefit. Don't you think, from the Hulk hands? I think I could pull that off, right?
That's the next that's your next segment idea that you got right there. Just get the Hulk hands, start smashing a bunch of stuff. And
Joe Smash. All right, so let's smash catcher. Who is the catcher that you're worried about could be a bust this year in 2021?
To be completely honest, I didn't have a great answer for this, Joe. I think a lot of the catchers are going at actually fair ADP this year. And my original thought was to choose JT Realmuto at ADP 50, and it has nothing to do with the player JT Realmuto, because I think he's going to be awesome. I think he's probably going to be the number 1 catcher. He's the odds-on favorite there. I just think that there's a lot of risk investing that early in a catcher. But the pick for me that I'm going to go with is Mitch Garver, who, according to Fantasy Pros, has an ADP of 208.8 right now. He's going pretty late. I realize that the upside could be 30-plus home runs at the catcher position, which is very valuable. I just worry a little bit about the playing time, Joe. I don't know necessarily that he's going to play every day at catcher. They obviously have their DH role filled with Nelson Cruz.
Right.
Miguel Sano is going to be playing first base, so I don't think that Mitch Garver is going to be filling in there. I looked into the spring training playing time thus far, and I don't know if you want to buy into it too much, but each of Ryan Jeffers, Williams Astudillo, and Mitch Garver are basically all between 12 and 13 plate appearances. So they're splitting playing time 3 ways among catchers right now. I just worry that Mitch Garver is not going to play enough to put up. If he does, I can see him absolutely smashing this ADP. But again, I just really didn't have a great pick for catcher. Your thoughts on Mitch Garver?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I feel like as a catcher, too, I'm okay with Garver because I'm concerned with the playing time. I did see him play this weekend, and he looked good. He looked good at the plate, and it also depends on where they hit him in the order. If you recall a couple years ago when he was on fire, he was hitting towards the top of that order. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not with him, so that's also a big part too. If he's hitting at 1 or 2, it's very different if he's hitting at 7 or 8. But I think you make a really good case, and I think people are still kind of looking backwards at that big breakout season and trying to chase that a little bit. It's not terrible, but I'm kind of with you. Catcher was kind of tough. For me, I'm going this route because I feel like every year people try to convince themselves that Gary Sanchez is better than he is. And yes, he does have power, but at ADP of 148, Frank, I mean, I'm looking at this guy and I'm saying to myself, because he's a Yankee, I feel like you still pay a premium because he's that big name guy and because he does offer that power. But when you're hitting 200 and you're just sucking the life out of everywhere else, I can find 25 home runs from a catcher somewhere else. I think I can do it. Maybe I can even find 20 with a much better batting average. But trying to roll the dice and trying to get another 35 bombs out of this guy, I just don't think it's going to happen. If it does, again, what's the cost? I feel like it's like Infinity War at the end, which he says, and you know, what did it cost you to own Gary Sanchez? And Thanos says everything. That's what I feel like we're at. So do you feel like Gary Sanchez keeps getting actually reinvested in because of the high profile team he plays in? Because that's kind of what I feel like.
And look, first and foremost, people might know this by now, I'm a Yankees fan.
We know this. You're a Yankee guy. I'm a Met guy. These are the crosses we bear.
I don't want to come off as a homer or anything, but you know, much like I was talking about with Jose Abreu, I have never drafted Gary Sanchez in my life. for the reasons that you mentioned, Joe. I always thought that his floor was very low. Of course, he has a very high ceiling, but most of the time you had to draft him inside the first 5-6 rounds. Last year, his ADP dipped a little bit. It was around 78. This year, he's all the way down at 148. This is a spot where I'm willing to invest, and I understand the floor is very low. You might drop this guy by May 1st. He might lose everyday playing time to Kyle Higashioka. But the upside, based on where you're drafting him now, is he can contend for that number one catcher spot. He's someone that can actually push JT Realmuto. The batting average is going to be a hamper. He's probably going to hit 240, between 240 and 250. That's maybe even an optimistic projection.
I was going to say, if he gets to 250, I will buy you a hot dog at the ballgame, my friend. Nice big foot long with all the works on it, because 250 for Gary Sanchez, that would be quite an accomplishment.
But you look at his OPS, 2 of the past 4 years, 841 or better as a catcher. I mean, that's hard to find. I think that is pretty rare. So at his current ADP, he's actually been a target of mine. I've never owned him before, again, because he usually goes much higher. The floor is low, but I think the upside is still very high for him.
All right, let's go to first base here. You got a big name on your first base bust, and I want you to talk about it because it's Cody Bellinger, one of my favorite dudes. I love me some Cody Bellinger. So is it just the shoulder surgery for you? Is that the big concern?
Yeah, that's a lot of it, right? So I've said this. We did our first base preview, our outfield preview. We talk about Cody Bellinger. I had him as the bust at both positions there. And for me, is I want to get a warm and fuzzy feeling, Joe. With my
Isn't that why you came on the show with me today?
Of course.
Just to get that warm and fuzzy feeling?
Of course. I can leave now. I've already got my warm and fuzzy
feeling.
feeling.
It took 11 minutes and you're already there. You're very warm and fuzzy.
But specifically, I want my warm and fuzzy feeling with my first couple of round picks, right? I want to feel safe. And the truth is, just right now, I don't feel that way about Cody Bellinger. He has yet to appear in a spring training game. We're recording this on March 15th. I know he's getting ready to play soon. He hasn't swung the bat with both hands yet, too. So for all those reasons, the shoulder surgery that he had in the offseason, we've seen this affect guys. Sometimes it takes a whole season for them to come back from shoulder surgery. Michael Conforto a couple of years ago, it took him a whole year to get back on track after he had shoulder surgery. And every shoulder surgery is different. So I'm not just going to say, okay, he's definitely going to struggle. But I think he could get off to a slow start. So maybe if he does pay attention to Cody Bellinger as a buy low early on in the season. The only other thing I'll mention about him as well, Joe, is he has struggled against lefties in 2 of the past 3 years. So a 666 OPS last year, of course, a small sample size. 2018 was a full season, a 681 OPS that year. So he has these on-off seasons where he performs well against lefties, he struggles against lefties. Going into last year, he changed his batting stance for some reason. You're coming off an MVP season. Why would you do that? I don't understand. But for all those reasons, his ADP in the second round, it's an easy fade for me.
I haven't had a lot of picks at the turn around that area where you might be investing in him. To me, it's a no-brainer still to go with Freddie Freeman over him. I don't think it's a discussion right now.
For sure.
And I agree with what you're saying. It's like, why would you take the risk when you don't have to? Plus, I think there's a grouping of guys at first base when you get into that. If you're looking for power there with the, after even Pete Alonso with the Matt Olsons of the world, that you can make up some first base love later on. And I think even a guy like Paul Goldschmidt's getting kind of undervalued at this point in his career. And who's to say that he can't kind of give you similar stats to Cody Bellinger, especially now he's got some more lineup protection. First base for me that I think could be a bust is Josh Bell. Now the ADP is a lot higher. It's 133. But for me, I look at Josh Bell and I feel like everyone's still chasing that May from a couple of years ago when he was off the charts, and it just inflated him completely. Now there's a narrative that's building, I feel like, this offseason where he's now moved to the Washington Nationals, change of scenery, better lineup, better guys around him. And certainly that all could work out, but that still could. And I just want to, kind of reinforce that to people. It's not a lock. If you're telling me you're getting Josh Bell as your corner infield guy, I go, okay, that's a pretty good investment. But if he's your starting first baseman, I think you went wrong somewhere. And I think that's what I want to communicate to people. Is like, don't think that just because he's now away from Pittsburgh that everything else is cured. Because when you look into the deeper stats on Josh Bell, there's some things there that I think are still lacking. And sure, hitting around Soto and Trey Turner, and now Schwarber's there too. All that certainly can theoretically help. But it's still a theory. It's not in practice yet. So I don't want people to think it's a sure thing. How do you feel about Josh Bell going into the season?
Yeah, I am. I'm buying into that narrative a little bit more. He's going to be there with hitting coach Kevin Long, who has, kind of worked his wonders with a few other.
Great hitting coach. There's no doubt. Kevin Long is one of the best.
Yeah. So I'm buying into that narrative a little bit more, and getting out of Pittsburgh and having that lineup security. I think it definitely helps. like Gary Sanchez, I agree that there is a very low floor here. So you have to keep that in mind when you're drafting. If I'm in a deeper league, 15 teams or deeper, maybe even NL only, I wouldn't mind him as my first baseman. But you're absolutely right. If you play 12 teams, anything shallower, I wouldn't want him as my starting first baseman. Corner infielder, sure, maybe utility bat, I'm all right with that. I think the upside is very big. I think we can get maybe 270 plus batting average, 30 plus home runs. If he does that in the middle of the Nationals lineup, he's probably going to give you really good counting stats as well. But I do acknowledge that there is a very low floor. I'm slowly buying back in. As draft season has gone on, I'm buying a little bit more every single day with Josh Bell.
But you're buying him as a corner guy, right?
Yes.
Right.
In 12 teams or shallower, I would not want him as my starting first baseman.
Yeah, and I see that trend starting to go in that other direction where people are starting to buy in as a low end first base, and I just think that's pushing the envelope a little bit too much. I don't know if you want to go that route. So let's go to second base. And spoiler alert, we're gonna have some guys overlap here on this fun little program today. So who is your second base bust prospect guy? Because let me tell you something. This is a name that's come up quite a bit with a lot of our analyst guests here, and you're just another guy to kind of pile on. So go ahead, pile on Kevin Biggio.
Poor Kevin Biggio, man.
Poor Kevin Biggio.
He's become the industry favorite to be a bust this year, and it's pretty messed up. I mean, I think for the most part, the kid has been pretty talented thus far in his career. He's kind of the face of the 3 true outcome for second baseman. Well, he's going to play all over the field now for the Toronto Blue Jays, but lots of strikeouts, lots of walks, and so far he's been able to maximize he's been able to squeak every ounce of power out of the fly balls that he hits. And he's been able to push out that many home runs just based on pure volume. He's a guy who hits near 50% fly balls every single year with Kevin Biggio. And last year, the average home run distance for Kevin Biggio was 10th lowest in baseball, according to StatCast. And now they're deadening the ball. So I just think there's a chance that with the ball taking a bit of a step back, the power is going to take a step back for Kevin Biggio. And if he struggles at any point, they have a lot of depth there now. I think that they can go in a different direction. They could fill in. They could throw someone else there in the infield. So for all those reasons, I'm just kind of worried about Kevin Biggio getting pushed down the lineup. Struggles are going to be there. I don't think the power is going to be there like it was before. So I'm fading him at the ADP of 60 right now.
I'm telling you, everybody better pay attention because we've been saying this here. Frank said it. I've said it. We've had a few other guests say it. He's been on a lot of these busts or avoid lists or things like that. And it's mostly because of the ADP. It's because I feel like everybody's just seeing the glossy end of him. And once again, not recognizing, the downside of him. And if his name was, let's say, I don't know, Kevin Stampfl instead of Kevin Biggio, I wonder if we would recognize more of that. Not that you have any downside. You have none. It's all upside with Frankie Stamps all the time. Always will be. But I feel like we're kind of, especially those who remember his dad, I feel like whenever you have these younger players that are juniors or seconds or thirds, that we start to kind of think of them differently somehow instead of just thinking of them as guys who are developing at the major league level. And we need to cut them a little bit of slack and not expect that much that soon. My second best man is Keston Hiura, who is another guy that has come up quite a bit. And I kind of long for the Keston Hiura of the minor leagues, who was just a contact machine. I feel like he's gotten a little power happy, and I feel like that's kind of not his game. I think he's going to hit home runs in Miller Park because it's a hitter-friendly environment for home runs. But at the same time, I feel like he hasn't quite transferred over those contact skills that made him such a wonderful prospect that everybody was so excited about a few years ago. Now, maybe he could get back to that this year, but I didn't see that last year, and the injury to Christian Yelich last year and his lack of performance certainly did not help because Hiura was basically on an island. He had a couple moments there, some power moments too. He had some decent runs in the 60-game season. But overall, I'm not seeing the Keston Hiura that really got me excited 2 years ago. So why do you think that hasn't transferred over, Frank? Do you think it's a matter of them wanting more power out of him or him wanting more power out of himself?
I think it's probably the latter. I don't know that the team would tell him to, completely change his approach or, to swing more for power. It might be something that he's just trying. And let's be honest, pitching in the majors is just different. It's better than the minor league. So I agree with you. I actually have Keston Hiura as one of my busts this season as well. And for those who have him in keeper and dynasty leagues, don't freak out. You should still be very excited about Keston Hiura for the future. I agree with what Joe said that I think he can get back to being a player who makes more contact. The example that I like to use, Joe, is Austin Riley. His first season, he
Yeah.
came up, struck out 36% of the time. Last year, made a bunch of adjustments, lowered that strikeout rate down to like 23%, right around league average. If Austin Riley can do it, that level of prospect, I think Keston Hiura can do it as well. But I need to see it first. If you're going to invest in him this early, you're talking about the 6th round of a 12-team league. The strikeouts were just massive last year. His 20% swinging strike rate was second among all qualified hitters behind only Luis Robert, and Keston Hiura's strikeouts in general were the most in the National League. So for all those reasons, I need to see it first. The quality of contact went down as well. I like the player, but I'm going to fade him this year. And if he bounces back, I'll be willing to reinvest in 2022.
Pete Alonso is another one of those guys too that had that same thing. Like the minor leagues made a lot more contact. It was like a 280 hitter, spread the ball around a little bit, and then he hit those 50 home runs and he was chasing that record. And I think he's been very home run happy ever since. I'd like to see him get back to being a 35 home run guy with a 270 batting average instead of the 45 home run guy with a 225 batting average. That's just me. That's what I want to see. But I don't always get what I want. We all know that. Third base. Are you going to get what you want out of Matt Chapman? He was almost on my list. You have him on yours, so there must be some fire where the smoke is.
Yeah, and with Matt Chapman, it's not as much as a bottom out potential that I think here. I don't think he's going to completely sink you, but I just think that he's a little bit overvalued based on this.
Yeah, you nailed it. I feel like the same way. Like people are talking about him as a potential dark horse MVP, and I feel like I think that's putting too much on him.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, the ADP is 100.6 right now, and the third base position is still pretty deep. I mean, when you know that you can get Josh Donaldson 80 rounds later, I understand the guy might not have any calves left, but I mean, to be able to get someone like that late, Miguel Sano going 80 picks later, yes, Matt Chapman's going to be better than those guys, but is he going to be 80 picks better than them? I'm not so sure. And Matt Chapman's also coming off of hip surgery that he had last season. So far, everything's been good in the spring. He's been playing. He looks fine. I was watching the Oakland A's game yesterday, and he was on the broadcast talking about he feels great. He feels fine. He's making diving plays. So the injury's probably behind him, and I don't need to worry about that. But at this ADP, sure, there's a chance that he can go out and hit 260, 40 home runs. If he does that, he's definitely going to pay off. But if he struggles at all, the strikeouts kind of rear their head like they did last season, then I think Matt Chapman could be potentially overvalued in this spot.
You make a great point about Donaldson, too, who's a guy that I find is finding his way onto a few of my teams lately. And you're right. If everything breaks well for Donaldson, how different is he than Chapman stat line wise? I mean, at the end of the day, they could be very similar in such a chasm in terms of ADP and investment you have to make in those guys. My third baseman is ADP number 60 overall. Stop me if you heard this name before. It's Kevin Biggio. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he can play everywhere, but I just have questions. I really do. I just don't think we've seen enough to make us a top 60 overall player investment. And I know people get tantalized because of the combination of skill sets, and that's fair. That's cool. I get that. But think about the other guys that are going around that ADP. And I think that's very difficult to make an investment on him as opposed to some of these other guys. And that's, I think, even the bigger struggle I make too. And granted, second base isn't great. And I understand that's also partially driving this ADP up of his because people are a little concerned about the position, and rightfully so. But Frank, I struggle with just the players around this 60 range because I feel like there's better investments to be had. Is that something that you're also kind of finding?
Yeah, I think overall, as usual, we're freaking out about steals, right? So specifically in Roto or your head-to-head categories leagues, people are trying to pull steals up the board. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing Kevin Biggio go in this range right now where he is. Again, the ADP is 60.4 on FantasyPros. I think people just see the 2020 potential. And I guess if he hits that, if he goes 2020 with a 240, 250 batting average, he's not really dissimilar from someone like Trent Grisham. So if that's the case, sure, if he gets to those numbers. But I think we're going to see the power with the dead ball. I think we're going to see the power come down a little bit. And he's been so efficient on the base paths thus far.
Right.
I think at some point the other shoe is going to drop where, we're going to see a few of those caught ceilings. And if that happens, do the Blue Jays kind of throw up the red light and they're like, okay, let's slow down a little bit. Let's not have you run. And if that's the case, we might be talking about like a 10 to 12 homer, 10 to 12 steal guy, which is valuable, just not a pick 60.
Going one pick later is Gleyber Torres, who I'm more willing to take an investment on. I think we all forget how good he was 2 years ago. Oh my goodness, what a season Torres had. Also around that ADP is a guy like Steven Strasburg, an ultimate kind of game changer at that, at that spot at 60. He looked very good this weekend, finally making his spring debut. I think that is a big positive there. Michael Conforto, very solid player. Charlie Blackmon, Paul Goldschmidt. These are players in that same vein. And I just feel like they're better investments. And that's kind of where I come to. Now, I agree with most of your guys on this list. I have a little bit of a problem with the next one, just a little. So I want you to explain yourself, Frankie. Explain to me the Marcus Semien concern. And I guess I get it because you did see him not live up to the 2019 or the second half of 2018 last year. But do you want to chalk that up just because 2020 was weird and maybe preps got thrown off and things like that? Or did you see something else in there that's concerning when it comes to Marcus Semien?
Yeah, it definitely could be that last year was just a weird season, and I am making that case for a ton of players. Austin Meadows, Gleyber Torres, Javier Baez. They all had weird seasons last year, but these are guys that we've seen do it before, and I trust the talent. Marcus Semien, it's not a huge investment right now. The ADP is 133.8. The problem for me is that we saw his best season in 2019 with the infamous juiced ball. So I'm going back to the ball here. With them deadening the ball, I worry about him getting back to that level of 33 home runs, 123 runs scored. He has been hitting near the top of the Blue Jays lineup in spring, so that's definitely an optimal place to be. But look at his OPS over the last 5 seasons. 679 last year, 892 in 2019, awesome season, 706, 722, 735. Which of these seasons is not like the other? So
I love Sesame Street. It's my favorite.
So I just don't see him getting back to that type of level. I think he's probably like a 750 OPS bat, which is fine, but I think you could find guys like that a little bit later on in the draft.
Yeah, I know Grover and Cookie Monster actually had OPSs quite similar over that same span, which is, and Cookie Monster's really let himself go. I just want to say, I feel like, he really needed to come into camp this year in better shape, and he didn't. And clearly quarantine did not serve him well. I think we can all agree on that. My shortstop is somebody that a lot of people are going to come at me about. I don't care. I'm a tough guy. I can handle it. It's Adalberto Mondesi. Oh, my goodness. You got to basically have a top 20 pick on this guy if you want to take him. And you're right. Everybody's freaking out about stolen bases. And everybody remembers September, which was glorious. He had 356. He had 1,000 OPS. I know. I get it. It was tremendous. He had 16 stolen bases. He was absolutely on fire. But can we remember what happened before that, where he hit under 200 with an OPS that was, under 500? Can we talk about the fact that on the road last year, he had a $190 with a 500 OPS? OPS, not slugging, OPS, 500. Can we talk about the fact that he still hits 235 against right-handed pitching? There's a lot of warts here with Mondesi. And let me tell you, Bobby Witt Jr., that kid is the real deal. I am very excited about him. I had drafted him in Dynasty League the previous season when he came up in his first in the draft, actually, when he was first in the rookie draft. And, I know what they look like to a certain extent. And Bobby Witt is that kind of guy. And he's going to have that job sooner than later. He reminds me a lot at the plate of David Wright, actually. I think that's a really good comp in terms of swing path and things like that I see when I watch Bobby Witt take at bats. And that's going to be, let me tell you, if he can get to be that kind of a hitter at shortstop, that's fantastic. But I feel like everybody, once again, is seeing only the glossy finish, the best of Mondesi. But if you go back, Mondesi's done this all over the place. He's been the pillar of inconsistency throughout his career. And as much as I understand it's an important category, and in head-to-head category leagues especially, he could be a guy that wins that category by himself any given week. I just feel like at what cost? And that's kind of my concern there, Frank. So do you find yourself having shares of Mondesi this year in your drafts?
I'm more willing to invest in Mondesi in one of these NFBC drafts, deeper formats where there's an overall prize, right? So if you play in a standard 10 or 12 team head-to-head categories or Roto League, not that I'm downplaying those, a lot of people do. I play in those leagues as well. But I just think that you just don't really have to take that risk, right? So I would say among all the hitters being drafted inside the first 30 picks, there is no one with bigger boom or bust potential than Mondesi. He can return first-round value. He can be someone that you're looking to drop by June 1st. I really do believe that with Mondesi. The range of outcomes is massive for him. I will just point out, Joe, and I agree with you. First 37 games last year, he was dreadful. He hit 179, awful. Final 22 games, we all know what he did. He was great.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
The first 37 games, I think, could maybe be attributed to the fact that he had shoulder surgery in the offseason last year. We didn't even know if the season started in March like it was supposed to, if he was going to be ready for the start of the season. So I think maybe that slow start last year had to do with him coming back from shoulder surgery. I'm just making the case for, again.
Look, you can make a lot of cases for.
Right.
It's just the ADP where I struggle.
Yeah.
If he was going in the late third round into the fourth round, I go, okay, sure, I get that. But basically, he's got to be kick him at like the beginning of the second round. Something I just can't in a 15-team league. I can't really do that. There's too much talent on the board. And more specifically this year, in that second round, that's where that last grouping of pitchers goes. That Yu Darvish, Walker Buehler grouping of pitchers, that once they go, it is complete crapshoot out there. And I find it really hard to pass on those guys. If I don't have at least one pitcher in the first 3 rounds, I don't love what those teams look like whenever you kind of do mocks and things like that. And therefore I haven't left the first 3 rounds without at least one pitcher, sometimes 2. So it's tough. And Mondesi's tough. And look, if you're in a shallow league, I'm more willing to take that shot, because I feel like you can make up the ground later on. If things don't work out, it's okay. If you're a smart drafter, you can make up the pitching too. That's the caveat there. So let's talk about outfielders. You've got 3 guys on your list: Aaron Judge, Teoscar Hernandez, and Chris Bryant. Now, Aaron Judge, I do find a lot of shares of my team because I feel like he is falling almost too far, where I'm just basically price enforcing. And I feel like if I have to, I will trade him off the first hot streak and take away some of that concern I might have about injury. Teoscar Hernandez finally became the guy last year that everybody who was into Teoscar Hernandez thought he could be. Still strikes out a lot, still doesn't walk a lot, but everything broke right in that short sample. He's at ADP 80. Aaron Judge is at 50. Chris Bryant you have as the third guy at 113. Clearly, we know some issues there with Bryant too over these last few years, and maybe the hype was always just too much. Maybe he just was never going to live up to being one of the best players in baseball, just a very good one. So take me through Judge, Hernandez, and Bryant, what you see with these 3 guys.
Yeah, so with Aaron Judge, it's basically just the same thing as Matt Chapman. I just don't see a huge difference between, if you want a power hitter who has a ton of injury risk, why wouldn't you just take his teammate Giancarlo Stanton, who's going 60 picks later? Stanton does not have outfield eligibility. I understand that. He's util only to start. Maybe he gains outfield eligibility at some point, but I think the upside for Stanton and Judge are similar, and I think the downside and the injury risk is also similar between those 2 guys. So I just think Judge is a little bit overvalued based on what he gives you. In OBP or points leagues, I have no problem taking him here, but if you play in Roto with batting average, he's just a guy who's going to hit 260, 270, lots of power, but there is a lot of injury risk there as well. Teoscar Hernandez, I like what he did last year a lot, and I picked him up on a few teams, but it's just what you have to invest. ADP 80 right now for Teoscar Hernandez. If he was going 30, 40 picks later, I might be willing to.
It used to be 180 last year.
Dude, it was like 280 last year.
Right, that's the point. And that's why I would always take the shot, because I always felt like he had this upside, but now we're in that flip area, which is the same thing we talked and opened the show with. It's like, okay, now that the player's done it, do you want to invest in it at the high point? And that is a real question you have to ask yourself.
Yeah, because you need Teoscar to do basically what he did last year and then maybe even build off of that. And I spoke about this with Kevin Biggio, but the Blue Jays have a lot of depth. Randall Grichuk finds himself on the outside looking in right now. If at any point Teoscar Hernandez, the strikeouts become too much, we saw that the past couple of years. He got sent down to the minors. He's been shuffled back and forth. Look, if you buy the average exit velocity and the batted ball data, Teoscar Hernandez impacts the ball very hard. He's actually a lot like Aaron Judge, where he can make up the fact that he strikes out so much just because he hits the ball as hard as he does. But to invest this high after such a small sample size, it's tough for me to do. So I'm not going to be doing that with Teoscar Hernandez. And then Chris Bryant, I've been off him for the past couple of years, and I understand that he's entering a contract year, and people have done studies that the contract year is not a real thing. I think for higher-end players, yeah, there is more motivation.
I did a study for the higher-end players, and it is a thing for them, typically. But that being said, I still have concern with Chris Bryant for a few reasons, where he hits in the order. Number one, those 5 category guys, I like him more in points leagues than I like him actually in Roto formats, because I think he'll still fill the box sheet for you. But that's definitely something to consider too, because it's the higher end players. What happens is to that study is that they take free agents year over year as a whole, but most guys who are playing on 1-year deals or cycle over, they're not good players anyway, so they drag down that average. So typically, yes, the premium guys do at least go, I think it's around 70% or so at or above their normal expectation on those contract years, and that is something worth paying attention to. But I don't know if Chris Bryant's a premium guy, and that's my bigger question.
Yeah, I think he's suffered so many injuries, Joe, that it has really just affected his ability the past couple of years. And he's almost done what you want Pete Alonso to do. He has sacrificed some of his power for batting average. He's striking out less than ever before. But yeah, really at this point, what is he a standout in? If he's hitting near the top of the lineup, he's going to give you a lot of runs. Maybe he'll hit 25 to 30 home runs, but the RBIs could be low. They have been the past couple of years. I think his batting average will be okay. He's probably going to be a 270 hitter, somewhere in that range. The underlying batted ball numbers for Chris Bryant the past couple of years have not been good, but But yeah, contract year. So if you buy that, then maybe you are willing to invest at this point. It's a low cost. It's lower than ever before, 113 for Chris Bryant. But even then, when I spoke about third base, I think that's a very deep position. Same thing with outfield. I think there's a lot of outfielders that I wouldn't mind grabbing later on. I just don't really like the price here on Chris Bryant.
There's a theme developing here too, which is guys in this 60 range. And my outfield starts with Randy Rosarena at 61. Sorry, just not doing it. Not at 61. I already mentioned some of the names that I like around there that I think are better investments. Have we learned nothing? I mean, it's the same thing all the time. A young player comes up out of nowhere, seemingly lights the world on fire. And then what happens? The league adjusts to him. And then it's really hard to adjust back. I mean, this spring's certainly not very encouraging if you love Randy Rosarena. He looks like exactly where he left off, which is they figured out the weak spots and they're just going at him in this way now. And until you prove that you have to be pitched to a certain way, they're just going to throw fastballs at you and say, okay, kid, hit it. And eventually when you do it enough, they go, okay, now we got to sit there and get a plan and break you down, because why would they want to have to spend extra time on you? Nobody wants to work extra except me and Frank. Frank and I work extra, and that's why we're big deals. But here's the point I'm making about a Rosarena. It's the investment you make in him. And Frank kind of touched on this earlier with some players. Not only do they have to be that guy, they might have to be above that expectation. And I think that's asking a lot. And there's certainly an opportunity and possibility that Randy Rosarena becomes a 30-30 guy. I get that. He could be that good. However, let's also look at the track record of even really good players that sophomore season, even really good players after that hot run. Look no further than Austin Riley coming up and crushing things, right? You can go back to Eric Hosmer, to Jason Hayward, guys who looked like they were going to be superstars out of the gate. And what happened? The league adjusted to them, and it took them a long time to adjust back. And some of them never got to that other plateau, that superstar plateau. And that's okay, but it's just realistic. And I think we need to be more realistic about Randy Rosarena, and no one else is. Kyle Lewis is second for me, Frank. Once again, a lot of swing and miss. Once again, a minor league track record that suggests that this was, the best possible scenario. And there's some bottom here that we haven't quite seen. And at 137, it's not a huge investment, but I think there's a reason why everybody was so surprised by Kyle Lewis. It's because it's surprising what he did last year. Let's call it what it is. And last is AJ Pollock at 178. And I have seen AJ Pollock invested in even earlier than this in a few drafts. It was only 60 games to play last year, and AJ Pollock played them. That is the complete false sense of security that you could ever have about a player. AJ Pollock does not play full seasons. He never has, not in many, many moons. And I understand it's the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are also a team that has options and can move guys around. And I just don't think you can look at AJ Pollock as a piece that you can have on your roster and feel good about, because it's not when, it's if he's going to miss time. So those are my three guys. Anything you want to pick apart with a Rosarena, Lewis, or Pollock?
Yeah, I mean, specifically on Pollock, he's up there, and he's 33 years old now, and he has not played more than 113 games in a season since 2015. So I'm right there with you on AJ Pollock. I almost chose him as one of my busts. And Randy Rosarena. Normally, Joe, I'll pick your brain a little bit about this. I don't like to look into spring training stats and react too much, but I think it's relevant when we saw guys break out after such a shortened season. For specifically guys like Zach Plesac and Randy Rosarena, where we don't really know what to make of from last year. Specifically with Plesac, he only faced, I think it was 5 teams, and he had 8 starts, but they were against really bad competition. I mean, it was the American League Central, so he's struggling in the spring, and the same thing with the Rosarena. It's a little bit different because the Rosarena did it in the playoffs, biggest stage against some of the best pitchers. I get that, but now I think it's 3 for 17, 6 strikeouts to just 1 walk in
That's
spring
what's
training.
Concerning is the lack of contact and the strikeouts and all that. So you don't want to take too much out of spring. I definitely in that, but there's some guys where you're right. Spring does matter to a certain degree. It matters for Trey Mancini. It matters for Steven Strasburg. It matters because you want to see health and you want to see good things. It matters for Byron Buxton, who I saw go yard and looked really good and balanced at the plate and a little bit sized up, to be honest with you. I always feel like he played too light, and I feel like that was part of the reason why he had so many injuries, because of the style of play and the weight that he had, or lack of. There's things that you want to glean from spring training, and I think Randy Rosarena's spring is absolutely concerning, and it should be. I don't want to drop him off the planet, but do I want to take him with a 60th pick overall? I don't. I just don't. I don't feel like he is a better investment than Michael Conforto. Does Conforto have the upside? No. But I think I know what Conforto is, and I think it would take everything in Randy Rosarena's being to match Michael Conforto's ceiling and floor this year. And I think that is the bigger point to make. And Charlie Blackmon, another player where I just believe in Charlie Blackmon. I've seen enough Charlie Blackmon. Okay, if that's the pivot, if those are the outfielders in that same range, I'm so much more willing to go that route. So yeah, it's nice to hear somebody else question a Rosarena because yeah, he was good in the playoffs until he got to the World Series and more film was on him. And then what happened? Like everybody was like, okay, let's do this instead and see how he reacts. And guess what? It's just nobody stays that hot in baseball for that long. And when you do it in the playoffs, everybody goes up in arms because it's on the national stage. All right, so give me some of your pitchers that could be bust this year. I know you got a couple good names here.
Yeah, Dodgers fans are going to hate me. I had Cody Bellinger here as a bust. And my number one pitcher bust is Walker Buehler, and has nothing to do with talent. I think he's awesome. Per inning basis, he's going to be a top 10 starting pitcher. Innings, that is the key word here with Walker Buehler. I just don't know how much they're going to let him go. Obviously, the Dodgers have a ton of depth. Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin there on the outside looking in, and they have aspirations to make it back to the playoffs, back to the World Series. They want Walker Buehler fresh for then. They don't care about April, May, June. Sure, they have to get there, but they're going to get there. They have enough talent. They have enough depth. They also brought in Trevor Bauer, so obviously that helps. Walker Buehler dealt with blisters last year, so all those reasons, I mean, I just don't know. Maybe he gives you 160 innings. That's fine. I have him as I think it's my 13th or 14th starting pitcher. Right now, he's being drafted as a 7th starting pitcher off the board. That's too early for me. The other name, Max Scherzer. These two could easily blow up in my face. I realize that. But Max Scherzer, it's the back injuries, the neck injuries. The past couple of years, he has allowed harder contact than ever before. The walk rate was up last year. I don't know if you want to put too much stock into last season. Swinging strike rate was down a little bit for Max Scherzer. He's just getting up there in age. Injuries, performance is starting to wane a little bit, and it's just another one like Walker Buehler where you have to make that investment in the second or third round, and it's just really too high for me when it comes to Max Scherzer, given his age. And the last name I mentioned, one that we'll agree on here, Joe, is Dinelson Lamet. And how can you be confident at this point? The guy has not pitched in the spring. It kind of seems like he's a ticking time bomb. Had the biceps inflammation last year. Normally that's a precursor for worse things to come. He has had Tommy John surgery already on that same arm. And we had performance concerns. He did something last year that we never saw before. Was he going to replicate that? So you have all this and the injury, and I think he's still being drafted inside the top 100 picks, which seems ludicrous to me, Joe.
It is. I've dropped him considerably in the rankings. And if you're looking for rankings, you can find them on fantasypros.com. You just go to MLB, go to 2021 rankings. You can see all the different experts there and all the ECR and ADPs. And I have Lamet on my list too, and I've dropped him considerably for the same thing. Plus, they have options too. They have depth in that rotation. They have guys that they can bring up like a Mackenzie Gore at any given time and go take over. So they don't need Lamet either as much now that Snell and Darvish is there. So we definitely agree there. And Scherzer, it's funny. I don't have any shares of Walker Buehler, and Scherzer's a guy that I'm just kind of respectfully stepping around this year. I have one.
That's a good way to put it.
Share. Yeah, because I respect him so much, and I'm like you. I feel like it could make me look like a fool for doing that, but it's just a lot of mileage there, and it feels like the body's breaking down a little bit, and that's just typical. That's just something that's makes him human, and he has been so not human for so long that, we always expect the best out of him, but maybe it's time to look around. So besides Lamet for me, Kyle Hendricks was another one for me where I think everything broke right. Not the biggest strikeout guy. He's going in the top 100 right now. I kind of struggle with that. I always loved him as like a guy as my 4th or 5th starter, but now he's more like a 2nd or 3rd, depending on the depth of your league, and I'm just not there. And then Shohei Ohtani at 173, who, I know this one can bite me. So I'm just going to come out there and I'm going to be very transparent and I'm going to say it right off the bat. Shohei Ohtani could be MVP this year. If he hits the way he's capable and pitches the way he's capable, it could be a great fun ride, wonderful story, maybe the thing that Major League Baseball could use more than anything. But have we learned nothing? Have we not watched this show before? I feel like it's a rerun. It's like, we get very excited about Shohei Ohtani and look at the stuff and look how he plays. And Frank, I don't know. At a certain point, when do we just kind of say, I'm willing to let it happen on someone else's team?
Yeah, the ADP, I mean, you don't have to invest much. I guess that's probably the best part, but he's moving up draft boards. I've seen him climb because people are getting excited about what they see and hear in spring, throwing 100 miles per hour, hitting over 500. He's crushing pitches. He's awesome. I agree with you. He is a spectacle to watch play baseball. Mm-hmm. But, look, going inside the top 200, the downside for him, this is another one of those boomer busts. He could be awesome. he could be off of your team by May if he's hurt or just not performing. So I don't have a problem fading Shohei Ohtani at this price.
All right, now every closer obviously can be a bust, and they all have that capability. But who's your favorite or most likely one? Because I always have one every year that I'm like, stay away from this guy. I remember a couple years ago it was Hansel Robles. I was like, nope, not buying this guy. And they're the worst because sometimes the guys are in the middle, and that middle tier where there's like a false sense of security where they're safe and good investments, and it's just never going to happen, and they're just going to implode the following season. But for you, who do you have your eye on that you're concerned with this year?
Yeah, so this one's tough because I really like James Karinchak. He is awesome, and he's really fun to watch, and he's got the whole wild thing going on, and throws 100 miles per hour and wipe out breaking pitch, and he can strike out 17 batters per 9. I don't know that he's going to be the closer for Cleveland. That's the biggest thing for me. And even if he is the closer, the fact that he walks as many guys and struggles with control the way that he does, I think that there's a chance that he could be taken out of that role as well. Maybe he's still really good in a Devin Williams kind of way where he's a setup and he gets all these strikeouts and he has awesome ratios, but they have a few other names that they've talked about there in Cleveland using as a potential closer. Nick Whitgren is a solid veteran that's been around. He's a good pitcher. Emmanuel Clase, they got originally in the Corey Kluber trade a couple of years ago from the Texas Rangers, so they've talked him up as a potential closing candidate. I like Karinchak. He's a lot of fun to watch. I just don't know that he's going to be the closer for sure, and that is a lot to invest inside the top 100 on a reliever who you don't even know if he's going to be the main guy for save sources on his team.
I agree. I don't think it's nearly as safe as a lot of other people seem to think. And for me, it's Rafael Montero, another fallback guy that people seem very comfortable falling back with. And I get it, saves are saves, and I'm the king of saves or saves. Don't go chasing them. But some guys make me a little more warm and fuzzy, to coin the phrase that you so put out there before, than others. And Montero just does not do that for me. I'm just worried about the ratios. I'm worried about, and I understand people could say, well, maybe he doesn't have a lot of, guys that can compete with him for that role. That's fair. But I don't know. I mean, if we've learned anything, it's that these roles are fluid at the closer position with many, many teams, and it's something to be very careful of how you invest. So let's take a break from the busts here. Those are the bust teams. In fact, we'll recap real quick. My bust team: Gary Sanchez at catcher, Josh Bell at first, Keston Hiura at second, Kevin Biggio at third, Adalberto Mondesi at short, Randy Rosarina, Kyle Lewis, AJ Pollock in the outfield, Kyle Hendricks, Dinelson Lamet, Shohei Ohtani, and Rafael Montero. For our boy Frank Stampfl, Mitch Garver at catcher, Cody Bellinger at first, Kevin Biggio at second, Matt Chapman at third, shortstop Marcus Semien, outfield Aaron Judge, Teoscar Hernandez, Chris Bryant. The pitchers: Walker Buehler, Max Scherzer, Dinelson Lamet, and James Karinchak as the relievers. So let's get to your questions out there and talk a little mailbag here. Thanks for sending us your questions. Let's go with Scorchpan at Scorchpan. Scott Pankrantz wants to know, need help with draft strategy, 6x6 head-to-head 10-team league. Was thinking about waiting 6 rounds to draft a pitcher. Also, I'm picking third, Tatis or Soto. So let's take that one first. Frank, picking third overall head-to-head 10-team Cats league, would you go Soto or Tatis?
I would say if the 6th category is any type of OBP, I would go with OBP or walks. I would go with Juan Soto. If it's not, if it's just hits or something like that, I would go with Fernando Tatis. I think that they're both awesome. I think that Tatis could go 30-30 this year, 280 plus batting average. Soto also going to be great. I just think the steals are going to be a little bit less, maybe hits for more batting average. And of course the OBP is going to be massive. So if that 6th category is OBP or walks, I would go with Soto.
All right. And I think 6 rounds is way too long to wait for a pitcher, even in a 10-team league. I want to get, I told you, the pitching falls off a cliff, and coming off the season we're coming off of, where pitchers don't have the stamina build, is the young ones, especially. I'm leaning on the older guys, the 200 inning guys of the past, the Grenkes and Charlie Mortons, and the guys that nobody's excited about, but I'll take them on my roster. I am perfectly fine with that. I don't think I want to wait 6 rounds to take a pitcher. I want at least 1 ace, maybe 2 pitchers in that amount of time. And every draft is different, and I understand every league is different. Some leagues will just as collectively undervalue certain things, but that just seems like too long for me. It's not my kind of deal. Do you think this is a viable strategy even in a shallow league?
No. In a shallow league, I think it's even more
the opposite, right?
It's even more imperative to stand out at every position that you possibly can, right? So pitching being the hardest to find right now, I would try my best to get 2 of the top 10 guys. I don't know if that means investing 2 of your first 3 round picks, but it sounds like you were set on taking one of Soto or Tatis. So if that's the case, maybe you come back around in rounds 2 and 3 and you take starting pitchers with both of those picks. I will just say, if there's no like innings minimum, of course you can go with the Marmol strategy and just draft a bunch of relievers. If you want to wait in that case and take a bunch of relief pitchers later on and not draft a single starter, I have no issue with it. But again, that's dependent on, if your league has a weekly innings minimum in head-to-head categories.
All right, let's talk to Daniel Vick here at DVick331, one of our best listeners here on the program. Daniel, we appreciate you. Bryce Harper or Christian Yelich in a points league? I say Bryce Harper. Sorry, I just do. Maybe that's just me. I can't quit him. I'm a big fan. But Yelich, for me, came out of nowhere and has now kind of disappeared again right when I started to buy in finally last year. It took me a long time to buy in. That first year, those last 2 months, I was not buying in. I said, whoa. 2 months of greatness does not make you great. And then 2019 happened and I was wrong, and I'm okay with being wrong there. And in 2020, Gazay was injury, maybe something else there. But for you, who's the better investment?
I would still go with Christian Yelich. And if you look at the batted ball data, he hit the ball as hard last year as he did in 2019 when we saw him put up just that absolutely fantastic season. I think you can blame some of the shortened season stuff last year on the strikeouts. He blamed in-game video not having that. A lot of hitters did. JD Martinez, Javier Baez also complained about that. In-game video will be available for hitters this year, so keep that in mind for people who complained about it last season. I think that can help Yelich this year. I think it's very close. I love Bryce Harper. I would take Bryce Harper ahead of Cody Bellinger, in fact, but when it comes down to Harper versus Yelich, I would take Yelich there.
Dylan Gordon at Reynolds DG21 wants to know, he's got the 12th pick in a 12-team head-to-head Cats league. Shane Bieber is his keeper. Who are you targeting in the first, second round? So basically the wraparound. I keep this simple, Frank. I just take best players available there, and then I worry about the rest of it. I mean, in terms of targeting, it's very difficult because you got 12 other guys being kept, so you're probably into the second round value of players anyway, which is really now the third round when it comes to you at the end here at the turn, and that's how you got to think of it. So I would look at, the ADP of guys in the 32 range or somewhere around there and get an idea of those names. But I would just take the best 2 players on the board and not overthink this. How about you?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I might grab another starting pitcher just to give myself that pocket aces. I have Shane Bieber
nice.
And another ace, and then just take whatever, the best hitter available is. Looking at that ADP range, someone like a Manny Machado, if they make it to you, Xander Bogaerts, Anthony Rendon, all just rock solid hitters. I wouldn't have a problem with any of those guys as the first hitter on my team, but I'd probably take at least one pitcher there to hammer down with Shane Bieber.
Now, this question is perfect because we just talked about this. Troy Waldy at Taldy316 wants to know, how do you think the closer situation in Cleveland works out? Oh, my goodness. Yours must be ringing. Stampfl, what do you got to say about this question? Is it just Karinchak, or still Karinchak is the closer just as a fantasy investment you're concerned, or is there some other concern for you?
No, I mean, the way that I have read this situation, I don't think that Karinchak is going to be their closer. I think they want him to be that fireman type where maybe he goes multiple innings and he comes out in the biggest situation in the game. Happened last year in the postseason. I understand they don't have Brad Hand anymore, so people just kind of instantly elevated James Karinchak up to that closer role. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think one of Class A or Nick Wickren is going to lead this team in saves. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Again, Karinchak is awesome to watch. I don't think he's going to be the guy.
You're Class A. I just want you to know.
Thank you.
You're very Class A. That's why I like to have you on the show. Thank you for your questions as always. And if you got questions, make sure you follow us at Fantasy Pros. And that way, when I put this out, you can go ahead and be part of the mailbag situation here. And before we go, we always like to have a little fun with our guests here. So let's do a little what's trending with my boy, Frank Stampfl from CBS. And Frank, what I'm going to do here is take something that was been trending on Twitter somewhere over the weekend or whatnot and kind of turn it into a question for you. So are you ready to play a little what's trending with your boy, Joey P?
I am the furthest thing from ready. If it has anything to do with Grammys, awards, bracketology, college basketball.
No college basketball.
I will.
Look, you and are you my soulmate? Like, I do not watch a single like moment of March Madness. I just don't care. I know it's so weird.
I wish I could. I used to be invested in it. I was a huge UConn fan back in the day, but the older you get, you have less time. You know that. You have kids. I don't even have kids, and I don't even have time. So I don't know how you do it, Joe.
I don't. No March Madness for me. And not while I'm prepping for baseball and I just can't. I don't have the bandwidth for it. So let's go to what's trending. And over the weekend, Selena Gomez was trending
Ooh.
because she's retiring from music. And I know, Frank, you probably took this really tough. Like, I know you got a ton of albums, probably big fan of Selena Gomez. I feel like, she might be, that kind of songbird for you, like that muse sometimes where you're prepping for your drafts and you got the Selena Gomez kind of blasting in the background. But I want to check in, see how you're handling not only that retirement, but also the retirement of Albert Pujols, who's calling it quits at the end of this year. So do you think that Jared Walsh is going to kind of just surpass him this year? Or do you think they really let Pujols kind of play out his final season?
Well, I've got to say, the Selena Gomez is hitting me way harder than the Albert Pujols. So
it should.
Right in the heart, man. That one, it's tough to swallow. No, Albert Pujols is awesome. I mean, he is you hear this a lot. It's kind of cliche. He is a generational player. People probably throw that term around too much, but I'm
only throwing it around on Juan Soto. That's the only person I throw it around on.
Yeah, and you should. And Juan Soto, based on being however old, 21, 22 years old, he is on a Hall of Fame track. Back to Pujols. He's awesome. It's been awesome to watch him play out his career. It's been an absolute pleasure. In terms of him versus Jared Walsh, I think that the Angels kind of want to do the right thing. I don't know that they're going to play Pujols every single day, but, I mean, this is last hoorah, right? So when they go to different parks, different fan bases, people want to see Pujols. This is his final season. Same thing with Ichiro. His last couple of seasons. It was awesome to watch Ichiro these last couple of years. So I think we're going to probably see something similar to that with Pujols. I like Jared Walsh-ish as a corner infield type, a util, maybe you stash him on your bench.
I like him as a util bench bat kind of guy that you can float in there when he's playing. I'll tell you what, when he's in the lineup in DFS, I think that's the best Jared Walsh. I think that I want to make some investments in because it's going to be cheap. And look, good for Pujols kind of, deciding it's time. And in the words of Selena Gomez, the heart wants what it wants after all. So on to the next one here. What's trending? Dick Vitale is trending because it's March Madness. And obviously it's Dick Vitale season. That guy's like 147 years old. He's still alive and he's still kicking. He's still just as enthusiastic. The question is, will I have as long a career as being a very excited Italian sportscaster as Dick Vitale?
Sure, why not, man?
Right?
I mean, going
it's
strong.
Unbelievable, baby. I can do all that stuff.
Baby, I love the whatever it is, Geico commercial that he has going on where he dumps the Gatorade on his head and what, too much? It's hilarious. No, I mean the guy's awesome, right? He's been around forever. Of course you will, Joey P. Just I noticed you're clean shaven today for those watching on video.
I don't know what came over me this morning. I just went, you know what? Maybe it's spring fever. Like it's finally, I see grass again after weeks and weeks of just looking out my window and seeing snow. But I just, the head shaved, I'm all manscaped up for today and I'm ready to go. Right. But of course this will last like 2 days and then it'll be back to the beard because I look stupid like this. But yeah, maybe this is my Dick Vitale, my inner Dick Vitale kind of coming out. And this is why you watch us, not just listen to the podcast on Fantasy Pros MLB channel on YouTube. That's what you do. Last question here for you, Frank, and a very important one. The Bachelor looks like it's changing hosts and a lot of big kerfuffle, as it will. I'm not sure what a kerfuffle is, but I'm pretty sure that's an appropriate word to use. The question is, you've been a host now for a couple years. Are you applying for this job?
The Bachelor? Dude,
host of The Bachelor.
I can't tell you anything that has ever happened in the history of The Bachelor.
That might make you the perfect host, though.
It might.
I would take that gig. Let me tell you.
I was going to say, this is much better for you than it is for me. Like, you have Bachelor hosts written all over, Joe. Like,
I would ask those pointed questions. So how did you feel when he took her on that date instead of you? I would just sit there and ask I would just stir the pot and I would walk away and just, glorious. What a great gig that is. A little dangerous, but still. that's how you get the Dick Vitale longevity. It's that's right.
The Bachelor host.
You just tied it all together. You can't do it better than that. So we're going to put a bow on it because Frank just nailed it. Frank, tell everybody again where they can find the show, what you're doing, and how they can just get themselves more Frank Stampfl, which everybody needs.
You can find my work on Twitter. I'm tweeting everything out at roto_Frank, of course, and you can listen and watch the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast. That's our full-length podcast. We recently came out with a short-form version of it as well called Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, which is basically everything you hear, but in just 5 minutes. So it's kind of like the Spark Notes version of our full-length podcast. So we are putting out 5 of those shorter podcasts per week, but in the month of March, we're doing 31 podcasts in 31 days. Not all with me. I am doing 6 of those per week on Sundays. You hear our guys, Danny Vietti and Will Middlebrooks, former baseball player. They talk more about just general baseball topics, not fantasy so much, but everything else that you hear in that channel is going to be pure fantasy. So you can check it out there.
Very cool. I would like 31 days of Frank Stampfl. I'm totally on board. Dude, I appreciate you so much hanging out with us today and talking baseball. It's so good to have you on and talk again. Hopefully we won't wait so long next time to do it. But it was great fun. Again, go follow him over on Twitter at roto_Frank. And of course, go check out all the tools over at FantasyPros, the draft assistant with sync to your draft, the draft wizard, the simulator, all these products we have right now that are out there for our users on fantasypros.com. Go check them out. Get ready for your drafts, get prepared for your drafts, and then crush your drafts with all the tools we have available. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, Fantasy Pros MLB, while you're at it. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Frank Stampfl, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.